The High Court in Pretoria has interdicted the government from processing applications and making any payments from its 1.2 billion rand tourism equity fund. Trade union Solidarity and the lobby group Afriforum challenged the constitutionality of the fund. The duo filed for an urgent interdict after criticizing the fact that it is only accessible to people who qualify for black economic empowerment. Morne Malan, head of communications at Solidarity, joins us now. Morne, a very good afternoon. Thank you for speaking to us. I suppose that freedom for you means that you can put in an application to the courts and get this favorable response.
Yes, well, we're quite satisfied with the response, and it's always fun to talk to you guys in the media on a public holiday.
Morne, give us a background as to what led to this interdict that we're seeing today.
Yes, Hugo. Well, from the beginning, we felt that if this particular fund does not constitute relief funds, then our question is why not? The industry is still suffering greatly. To this day, they're still suffering from a 70% decline in income. So there's still a huge issue within the industry. It has been completely devastated on the one hand by the COVID virus, and on the other hand by certain irrational restrictions and lockdowns. So we believe that the virus affected everybody. It did not discriminate on race. We don't believe that any funds currently being dispersed should discriminate based on race. And we actually believe that for government to launch an equity fund amidst all the desolation within the industry it's somewhat opportunistic. And from that perspective, one could actually see government welcoming the destruction of the industry, because it allows them to reallocate resources in a manner which they deem to be more equitable. We believe that's not only immoral, but according to the court, it's unlawful.
Well, if government deems it to be more equitable, as you suggest, is that necessarily discriminating based on race?
Well, yes, it is. The criteria used within the fund explicitly discriminates based on race, and it actually discriminates with regard to ownership to the exclusion of all other categories of BEE. So ordinarily within the BEE sector codes, you'd look at other factors such as management control or skills development or enterprise development or any other such factors. Whereas the Tourism Equity Fund focused on one specific factor, which is racial ownership above everything else. And I do think we have to make the point that this fund simply does not constitute transformation. We've seen this time and time again, that all of these funds, they cater to certain politically connected people, and we know this to this day. And we can see this in the statistics. Statistics South Africa released a report last year which indicated that inequality within South Africa is primarily and predominantly an issue within certain racial groups and not necessarily between certain racial groups. So the vast majority of inequality in South Africa is due to certain black people, probably or almost certainly politically connected, who are benefiting at the cost of every other person in South Africa. So we believe that we are quite happy with the fact that the fund has been stopped, and we don't make any apologies for that.
Now, how much of the tourism sector is controlled by black people?
Well, it depends on what metric you're using. With regard to ownership as such, it should be around just over 40%. If you're looking at tourism businesses that are registered with a tax clearance certificate, it's significantly less than that. But another point which you have to make in this regard is the fact that the vast majority of employees within the tourism sector are in fact black, and these people work in established tourism businesses which have on the whole been destroyed, and which now have no means by which to obtain funding.
So in your view, the Ministry of Tourism in coming up with this should have potentially taken into account who the largest employers were in order to safeguard the jobs of not necessarily just the black people that are employed, but certainly the jobs of those that are employed in that sector?
Yeah. Yes, certainly. We believe there are various other criteria which are far more fair and far more equitable, criteria such as the amount of employees which a specific business has, the impact which the lockdown had on the business itself, and various other socioeconomic factors which are more than likely going to benefit predominantly black individuals in any case, without having to simply delineate the fund just for those with majority black ownership. We're not saying that anybody has a right to funding. Nobody has a right to funding. We're just saying that everybody should have a right to stand in line. Everybody should be allowed to stand in line and to apply for funding. Government is denying that right.
Now, was there any engagement between you and the Department of Tourism prior to going to the courts?
Yes, in fact, we sent a letter to them much earlier in this year. We did have a meeting with the Department of Tourism. It was not at all productive. The engagement was very on a surface level. It was not at all. We didn't really discuss any of the pertinent issues in depth, and it was quite clear that government was being obstinate and obfuscating certain facts, and that they had made up their mind. There was no reasoning with them in this regard.
Now, the fund is 1.2 billion rand. Are you aware of how much has been dispersed so far?
No, we have no idea at the moment.
Now, obviously, your case had certain merits, Morne. Would you take us through what it is that you certainly said to the courts in being able to achieve this interdict?
Yes, well, I alluded to it earlier. The fact, firstly, that the virus didn't discriminate based on race, and neither should the response to the virus or any response at this time. And then, of course, the fact that the fund itself was erected in contravention of the department's own sector codes, which should have been a big red light from the beginning for the tourism department. So yes, whereas the fund only concentrates on ownership, BEE is a far broader concept than that, and by broadening that, you also allow various other players to also enter the market.
Morne, final question. When the courts finally give that ruling, what are your expectations?
Well, at this moment, we're very optimistic. We do believe that we can have a finding in our favour, and that we're still awaiting the reasons for the decision for the interdict. So we are being patient at the moment, but we are optimistic. It's likely to be quite some time before we do hear the final decision on the substantive matters, but we look very much forward to the case being taken further.
Morne Malan, thank you for your time this afternoon.